In this episode, I'm going to discuss a topic that we tend not to hear a lot about, and that's social entrepreneurship. And you may be thinking, well, what is social entrepreneurship? How is that different than the traditional entrepreneurship that we hear about all the time online and everywhere, right? So social entrepreneurship is just the concept of launching an entity or an organization for the purpose of furthering a cause. And so what exactly does that mean? Well, when we think about entrepreneurship, people tend to think a traditional business, but there also are people who kind of confuse the two, where part of them wants to further a cause and they end up trying to start a traditional business to further their cause, and they really should be starting a nonprofit organization to further their cause. Entrepreneurship is not a one-sided thing where you can only do it this way. And you can be a leader and you can be a CEO and you can be everything you want to be and still have a cause in mind that you want to further. And I thought this topic was extremely important simply because I talk to a lot of people. They think they need to run out and get an LLC and they need to do all these things to start this business, and then next thing you know, what they really want to start is a nonprofit. There was a young lady I spoke to not too long ago, and her mission is to help women that have been trafficked. She wanted to have a house for them, someplace that they could go and build their lives again, build their lives up, find jobs, and so she went out and she got an LLC and she was looking for property, and she was really starting out in a way that wasn't conducive to the success of that project, because this is a project that she needs to build an organization that can get funded to do those things. People need to start things off correctly. You don't want to spend a bunch of money getting an LLC and you really need to start a corporation, or you don't want to spend a bunch of money start getting an LLC and then you really need to focus on getting your 501c3 designation from the IRS. So that's why I think this episode is so important. So let's hop into it. So first, before we get into the similarities of building a business versus starting a nonprofit organization, let's first talk about the differences. So when you start a nonprofit organization, you have to be recognized as what's called a 501c3. And that is a designation that comes from the IRS, and it's a great deal of paperwork, and you need to either get really educated about how to complete the paperwork so that you get your request to become a nonprofit organization approved, or you need to get someone to help you. So that's the first key difference. When you start a business, you don't have to be recognized as a 501c3. How you set up and structure your business is totally different. One of the key mistakes I've spoken to people and I've seen that they're making is they think that, starting, they need to go out and get an LLC to start a nonprofit. And I would advise you not to do that, simply because you need to talk to a legal professional before you spend the money to start an LLC that may not help you when it's all said and done. That legal advice is really, really important, and don't skip that step. And I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking, Michele, I don't have, money to pay an attorney to consult about my nonprofit or even my business. I just want to share a resource with you that is a low-cost legal service membership. So you may be thinking, well, what does that mean? What you get is an attorney that you can call, anytime you have a question about anything related to your business, and they can certainly answer basic questions about, the tax structure, because the tax structures are different for nonprofit versus a business. They can answer, whether you need an LLC or a corporation. So it's a great resource. And if you want to learn more, visit phenomenalboss.com to learn more. Now, the other key difference in how you get yourself set up is how a business is taxed and how a nonprofit is taxed is totally different. So that's where the tax professional or the tax attorney comes into play. You need that advice so that you set up your organization or your business, correctly from the start. The other key difference is with a nonprofit, there is no ownership in a sense, the same way that one owns a business. When you set up a nonprofit, you have a board, and the board actually governs the operation, the budget, and everything related to that nonprofit. That governance is done in a cohesive way with the CEO. That's the key difference. So the other thing with a nonprofit, while you may be the founding CEO, the nonprofit lives beyond you. But, the key difference with a nonprofit is there's no ownership, whereas a business, you actually own that business. So those are the key differences. Ownership. The other thing I want to mention is that there is no profit. So, you have to keep that in mind when you start a nonprofit, that there is no profit. And whereas a business, the profitability is limitless. Can you give yourself a salary in a nonprofit? Absolutely. Should you give yourself a salary in a business? Absolutely. That should be what you strive for. And so that is part of your planning process, and that is all part of why you want to speak to an attorney. The other thing I want to share now is,
did you know that more than half of Americans have listened to a podcast episode at least once? So, if you have a product or service that needs to reach an online audience, advertising on a podcast like The Boss Experience is a great way to get in front of your ideal customer. When you secure an advertising slot on an episode, The Boss Experience podcast listeners get to hear about your business every time someone tunes into that episode. So what are you waiting for? Visit bit.ly/podcast episode sponsor to get started. Now back to the episode.
The similarities for starting a nonprofit versus a business. So the first thing is passion. So people start nonprofits out of a passion for a cause. It's the same kind of process, for a business. You kind of start a business out of something you're passionate about, but keep in mind, when you're looking at passion, you have to make sure that when you start a business around that passion, that you're skilled and you have some expertise to bring people through a transformation or to solve a problem. And that also you're starting that, that business based on, your market research, that idea is going to be profitable. It's kind of the same thing with a nonprofit, because you can say, I want to launch a nonprofit around this cause, but you have to think from the start. You want to make sure that you launch your nonprofit based on what is there a need for. Because when it comes down to grant funding, which is what how most nonprofits operate, is you have to be able to demonstrate there's a need for this problem that you want to solve. And just like with the business, you have to solve a problem and you have to bring people through some kind of transformation. You have to be able to convey that in the form of a grant application at some point, so that you can get funded. And the second part is you have to, have a plan in place, whether you're developing a business or you are developing a nonprofit organization. You have to have a plan. A plan is key. And that's where you do the market research. Is this, this is a cause that is on my heart. This is what I want to build everything around. But is there a need for it? If you're launching a nonprofit organization, you have to ask yourself, is there a need for this type of service? And you have to develop a program, not just a bunch of activities that you think will help people have, that transformation when you're starting a nonprofit organization. You need to have a cohesive program, and most nonprofit organizations want funding. So you have to have a cohesive core program. The same with a business. You have to bring people through a transformation and you have to solve a problem. People don't buy products and services, they buy solutions and they buy transformations. So you need to remember that as you're developing your business as well. And so that is another way that nonprofit organizations and businesses are similar. Another way that nonprofit organizations and businesses are similar is You have to launch, you have to, plan out your funding, you have to figure out how you're going to open your doors. And so just like in business, nonprofits have to think about that as well. You have to make sure you have enough funding to be operational. And with a nonprofit, you can start off with just yourself as the single and sole employees. A lot of grassroots nonprofits start that way, but most likely they tend to get like volunteers, and even as they grow, a lot of nonprofits, they have a volunteer program within their organization. So that's all part of what you'd want to plan for as you're developing your nonprofit organization. And when you think about the launch for your business, and of course, yes, you need to launch a business and you need to launch a nonprofit. How the activities that go into both, that's where the differences are. But conceptually, they both are the same. You have to launch, have some kind of launch strategy in terms of how you'll operate, how will you be funded, what infrastructure do you need, all of those are the same. And then finally, a big piece, and this is what a lot of business owners do not do in the beginning, and some smaller nonprofits also struggle with, is right from the time you open the doors, you need to develop your systems. You need to think about your organization. What are you going to look like a year from now, 5 years from now? Who's on your team? What does your team look like? What are the specific job titles of your team? What are their job responsibilities and duties? So just like you should do that for your business, you also need to do that for your nonprofit organization as well. And I recommend, regardless of whether you're starting off with a business or you're starting off with a nonprofit, that you start off with kind of your core program. Will you have other services? Absolutely. But when you focus on that core program, that's at the heart of why you exist and what you do, I think you'll find much more success in that. And one thing I just want to say about this whole thing called entrepreneurship is your vision for your business can change. How you start off is not how you have to finish off. Or, the amazing thing I've even seen within myself is just how much my vision has evolved in terms of what I want to do in terms of, my business and how I want to see myself evolving as a person. A big factor for me researching what it takes to start a nonprofit and just making sense of the whole thing is the loss of my son in 2019. One thing I can say is losing my son caused me to really reflect on what I really wanted to do, what my business really should look like. And that's when I decided I'm going to start a nonprofit in his memory. And I'm sharing that to just say the vision that you started off with doesn't have to be the vision that you retire with. You're not locked into anything. Funny enough, although I have 22 years of experience in nonprofit work, 16 of those years being in management, I was overwhelmed at the thought of starting a nonprofit from scratch where I'm the founder. And that was very scary for me. I found this resource, and this resource actually gives me everything I need, a supportive network of other people who have nonprofits. But also, I have this membership that gives me information about how to fund my nonprofit, how to do the initial paperwork, how to develop my board, how to network within the community. This membership in a nutshell gives me all of that. And so in case there's anyone else out there that is thinking along the same lines as I'm thinking, and you want to start a nonprofit agency as opposed to, a business, and it's really on your heart to be a socialpreneur, and it's really on your heart to further a cause, go ahead and visit pathtoceo.com, and that's where you'll find more information about this membership. It's just been such a gem that I've found, and I just really wanted to share it because I know there's other people that may have it in their mind that they want to start a nonprofit and they just don't have the resources. And while I'm very, I've helped a lot of people start businesses, starting a nonprofit is not my wheelhouse. And so if social entrepreneurship is something that you're thinking about, just go ahead and give a look on the website and see what it includes. But, I could not have found a better resource that gives me everything I need from A to Z. So, with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. This episode is very close to my heart because it reflects my vision for my future. And I'm so glad to be able to take you on this journey with me.